Your presenters today are Mikko Viljama and David Williams. Together they have over 6 decades of experience in the paper industry, working in various functions ranging from the wet end to the dry end of the paper machine. Dave is currently the roll cover and maintenance technology unit leader in North America. Mikko is the director of North American service agreements and works with scoping and implementation of agreements. Today's webinar will describe how to improve roll asset management, reduce risks, and lower costs with a Valmet roll cover and maintenance agreement. Mikko is going to start off by explaining Valmet's overall approach to aftermarket agreements. Then David will continue by looking specifically at the roll cover and maintenance agreement. He'll discuss the benefits of an agreement, how an agreement works, examples of what we have achieved with agreements and customers, what types of services and modernizations can be included in a tailored agreement. Finally, we'll allow 10 to 15 minutes of time at the end for questions and answers. Take it away, Mikko.
So, good afternoon, everyone. As you heard, my name is Mikko Viljama, and I'm the head of the Valmet agreement business here in North America. I've been with Valmet for 25 years, from where the last 15 years or so in North America, and I am currently located in Atlanta, Georgia here. Before we let Dave talk about roles, I was going to give a short 10-minute overview from 25,000 feet of Valmet's agreement business, how Valmet approaches these agreements, and what are some of the things our customers are looking for from these partnerships. About 10 years ago, Valmet made a strategic decision to focus on long-term agreements. This wasn't really a difficult decision to make, as the message from customers, you guys, were loud and clear. You wanted to move away, when possible, from traditional transactional business, and were willing to seek out other easier methods to do business with Valmet. And as a result of this today, as you see, about every third production line here in North America has some sort of agreement with Valmet. A little bit of our services philosophy, and if you start from the bottom, you see that starts from our core values, which are safety comes first. We want to be close to you guys. We have people you can trust, and hopefully also solutions to match your needs. The second layer of this philosophy is the lifecycle approach, which means that we want to be part of the product from the day one when it leaves our facility to the end of the day it becomes obsolete. And the third layer of this Valmet's Way to service our delivery models, where we have the service agreements, which are the part of today's topic. And the fourth and the last final layer is our service offering itself. This means mainly the previously mentioned traditional transactional business. You see the same offering here with maybe a little more details, and I'm assuming that most of you are familiar with these, so I'm not going to go through these. Rather than my message here, when we look at this slide, is that basically anything Valmet offers, may it be a product or service, can be built to an agreement format. So, if you are buying something regularly from Valmet, I would highly recommend that you ask from your local friendly mill sales manager if there are any opportunities to simplify this business and make it hopefully even more beneficial for both parties. So what's typical for an agreement then? My personal opinion is that it makes little sense to make an agreement which is for 1 year or 2 years. Therefore, I always recommend at least to start with the 3-year agreement. The reasons for this are that it takes some time to get to know each other, us to understand how you operate, and what might be the possible challenges you have at your mill. So we typically start with the 3-year agreement, and hopefully at the end of that 3-year period, we ended up extending this agreement for another set of periods. These agreements can be either corporate level agreements or mill level agreements. And if they are corporate level agreements, they typically work so that the individual mills are automatically joined to the agreement, or the mills can choose if they want to be part of an agreement. With corporate agreements, and here I'm talking about, again, any kind of agreement, rolls, stockers, consumables, so on, we talk about different tier levels typically, depending on the business volume that the mill does with Valmet. And with these different tier levels, we of course include different services and incentives and programs, such as, for example, continuous improvement programs. We approach, or Valmet approaches these agreements as projects. And as project agreements have also a dedicated project or an agreement manager who manages these agreements. Especially if it's a corporate level agreement, we do have established a dedicated agreement manager for that agreement. One of the benefits with an agreement is commonly established terms and conditions, which, at least in a theory, should make the cooperation easier. These T's and C's for sure help if in the future we add other agreements to this portfolio. Part of doing the business easier is price lists, which mean that you don't have to every time ask a price for something you need. And typically with the agreements, Valmet provides a fixed pricing for the following 12 months always. And last but not least, if there's something we have learned in the past 15 years, it's that communication is the key to a successful agreement. With my own agreements, I typically propose that when we start a new agreement, we meet on quarterly basis during the first year. And if everything goes fine during the first year, I recommend that we meet twice the second year. And after that, it's basically up to you how often do you want to meet me. But I personally would like to keep the second year schedule and still meet twice a year just to make sure that everything's okay. As I said in the beginning, we do have a lot of agreements, but very few of these agreements are identical. And the reason for this is that we do always want to tailor these agreements to specific needs or targets you guys have. One customer might be looking for safety improvements and another one tries to, for example, lower their production cost. And the same tailoring shows up also with our offering. And what I mean by this is that, of course, the customer decides what products or technologies should be part of the agreement. But after that, also, we want to identify if there's any other complementary services which should be part of an agreement. We are also very flexible when it comes to choosing how we price an agreement. And this is the part where I would like to challenge you guys a bit. An agreement doesn't always have to be based on fixed or monthly pricing. Make us earn your money, your business, by selecting a pricing model which is based on, for example, how many tonnages you produce or get out of the door. So something to think about. What I wanted to point out here is that we Valmet people are famous of wanting to talk about our own products and services. But I personally would like to turn this 180 degrees around and look at each of your mill functions or personnel, the tasks and responsibilities they have, and understand what keeps these people awake at the night. And if there are some challenges, especially if they hind you to concentrate your core business, which is making paperboard or tissue, let's see if there's something we can offer to help you with these challenges. And just as an example about also people like superintendent and maintenance manager, and you probably can read that, but we have listed one of the possible tools for a maintenance manager would be conditioning monitoring, just as a simple example here. So a lot of agreements, but not too many identical ones. So even with a lot of different agreements, we still see some trends, some common drivers, which makes our customers search these partnerships. And by far the reason number one is reliability. It seems like everybody's looking for more reliable operations, partners, etc. And a solid number two is cost. I'm not talking about now finding the lowest price. I'm talking about partnering with someone who can reduce the overall cost during a certain time frame and also helps the mill, the customer, to budget this cost and stay within the budgeted cost. Everyone appreciates a proactive partner. And to give an example how Valmet does this proactive approach, we can take a look at, for example, the roll agreements, which Dave is going to talk in a moment. We always start those with the baseline audit to understand the current situation, and after we know what that is and what the KPIs and the targets for that mill is, we'll build a roadmap how to achieve those goals. And basically what this means in practice that Valmet becomes responsible of the rolls, and it's our job to make sure that the rolls are changed or served when needed. Last one is rather given, but still worth mentioning, and that is the expectation that the supplier you partner with will constantly improve what you do or what they do. We signed the first agreement 15 years ago with Temple Inn and Ontario Mill. We have a culture of doing these agreements, and we also have a dedicated group of people who manage these agreements. The most important thing for us is to understand each customer's specific KPIs and targets, so that we can build that tailored agreement for that customer. And when we have those KPIs and goals, then these will become our commitment and our common goals and achieve for both of us. I already mentioned the total cost of ownership, the TCO approach. So with Valmet agreements, you'll get access and support not only from our local people here in North America, but also from our experts globally. And with that, Dave, I'll give the floor to you. Thank you.
Okay, as Mikko mentioned to you guys, there are several levels of agreement within the different service models of Valmet, ranging from spare parts and mill site services, roll services, etc. But even within the roll portion of the business within our service sector, we have ranges of agreements there as well. Mikko mentioned the first agreement being Temple Inland Corporation in the mid-2000s. Prior to that, we even had a single mill agreement, which probably started several years prior to that in the 2004 range, and that would have been probably what you look at on this scale as a supply agreement, with discounts associated with a volume given to us to work on. If you took a step back towards transactional from there, something like a grinding agreement might fit in the transaction level. But we can tailor that up, including technical support for roll services, roll side, and on-site services for rolls. We can broaden the roll agreement to include other portions of the service sector within Valmet to make it more of a maintenance production support agreement, which would include maybe spares and or maybe MIL as well. But in several cases, we have gone to the level of including Valmet staff on site at the mill, either in the capability of sort of a roll manager or roll champion, which handled scheduling for roll changes, scheduling for roll maintenance, whether the maintenance was being done by Valmet or some other supplier, keeping records, working with the mill's repair shop, and effectively being what some corporations term a roll champion. The other side of that at the mill level service is in some cases we have taken over the roll service or repair shop at the mill, basically eliminating the need, except for recoverings, to put a roll on a truck and send it elsewhere, which is good for bearings and really not so bad for wear and tear riding down the road on the roll. If you can keep it in-house, there are obvious benefits of knowing exactly where it is, being able to go touch it, better for the bearings, and much easier to schedule what's happening to the roll. So if you were to back up to this previous slide, and let's say we were going to pick a technical support agreement or a maintenance production agreement, this next slide is sort of tailored to the steps that would be taken in order to implement that agreement. And it all starts, if you're a new customer, it starts with audits of both covers and the mechanicals of the rolls, so we understand what you have. Then that baseline of where you are is compared to what your goals are. And by comparing what's currently in service and what your expectations are for performance and cycle times, we can sort of map out from there what the scope of work needs to be. And if the desired run times are maybe a little bit more challenging than what the current equipment can do, then we have upgrades and things of that nature to help extend your run times as well. Once the path forward is chosen, Mikko's group steps in as a agreement manager. The goals are set, and we have semi-annual, annual, or quarterly reviews based on the customer's desire to touch base and see how we are performing against what our goals are. The information can be kept in Valmet Asset Manager. Some of you guys may be familiar with an older term known as Roll Tracer. Roll Tracer has been upgraded to the point now where it can house all of the history and scheduling needs for not just rolls, but say fabrics and spare parts as well. So it's a broader service than just a roll tracking system. Then as far as what type of support you guys should expect both off-site and on-site from your mill, typically the way it would work, this focuses on a single roll, if you will. Typically there is a product sales manager there to support during the down day when the roll's removed. It's up to the customer typically whether they want to handle the logistics to move the roll or they want Valmet to. The roll is torn down, inspected, documentations of inspections are created and sent. If there is no additional work that needs to be done, the remainder of the maintenance is taken care of. At the end of the day, the documentations and the reports are pulled together, sent to the customer. within the same time frame as the roll is returned, and then usually we would have the PSM there also for installation support, including things like nip impressions and things like that. When we take our service models and some of our different technologies that we can use for simulations and whatnot, we can look at what happens in between when we service the roll and the next time it's removed. We can compare based on vast experience with new machines and old machines where your equipment is running compared to your competitors in benchmarking. That's always of interest to people. Performance optimization through simulations is never a bad thing to take a look at where you are versus what you might be able to do to get you to peak performance. Condition monitoring, whether it be through iRolls or accelerometers or by monitoring the equipment in conjunction with our automation group using the industrial internet, all those things are available for condition monitoring. Then as simple as using the asset manager, you can monitor conditions to some extent that way just by comparing run times and what was done on different maintenance services as well. We do have a whole host of integrated advisors, from product sales managers to product managers to agreement managers, all there willing to help. Some of the issues that people run into when it comes to roll services: often working rolls can be quite complex. Working on them yourself or having someone who's not the OEM work on them can occasionally impact reliability if different clearances and original specs for bearing set points, seal clearances within a suction roll, seal clearances within a crown control roll, all that stuff is documented by the OEM, and it's not something that's available for others, typically speaking, and being able to go back and compare that on complex rolls can really improve performance long term on that. The advantage there would be a reduction in downtime, hopefully an increase in efficiency, and even potentially quality. Reliability tags along with that as your efficiency goes up. And simply dealing with a whole host of different suppliers can seem that it's less expensive up front, but from a managerial standpoint, it's always more of a burden. And when you're focusing on things like that, there are often things that you would rather be focusing on that have a bigger impact to your production. So the systematic approach, basically we feel that you have pretty vast experience running your own mill. We have experience building rolls, rebuilding rolls, making covers on the service side, but we also have the access to Valmet technology and new equipment through the capital group. Combining those three and working together really can equal to a solutions package that are very difficult to be touched by others. Reducing cost, managing your assets, and even understanding what your next investments need to be can be very beneficial and improve revenue. This last bullet point we sort of touched on. It's a reiteration of the different levels of agreements that are available out there, even just for rolls. Could be a simple grinding contract, could be a simple mechanical contract, maybe only just covers, or we could even get involved under the right circumstances and help you run your service center there at your mill. The other piece that is integrated pretty well within roll contracts is replacement rolls. The technical age of most machines in North America is probably an average of installed date of around 1985. That means there is a lot of old but robust equipment out there still running well. But since 1985, you can look at the host of suppliers that are now under the Valmet umbrella. We've made significant technology improvements in all types of rolls in that time frame. And as you order a new spare roll, obviously we cross-reference the age of your roll, the design of your roll, and consider what types of upgrades can be made to that roll to impact its runtime and its performance while it's in the machine. When it comes to discussing saving money and agreements, case studies often open eyes better than nearly anything else. So we're going to run through several case studies here, some from just a standard mechanical service agreement, a tissue, and maybe two board examples. This was a fine paper mill in the Northeast who had an agreement with a local shop but was unaware of seal clearances on the suction roll seals to the shell. They were unaware of the decal clearances on the end and what they needed to be. They didn't have bearing clearances necessary other than from the book. And there were a lot of details about old Beloit or Valmet roll that was being serviced locally. Simply by taking it back to OEM standards, they were able to take the roll. As you can see, I didn't count them, but maybe there's 20 runs there. They had 2 or 3 runs, maybe 4 or 5, 2 that barely made it over a 180-day mark. So we'll say their average at best was half a year. And by revisiting and inspecting the proper fits and clearances, nothing special was done from a modernization standpoint or an improvement standpoint, but simply going back to OEM standards allowed them to almost triple that. What type of benefits usually come from this type of agreement? Usually the ones that pay off in large dividends are increased production, improved sheet handling, which improved sheet handling actually becomes increased production, and in some cases better sheet quality if you're able to avoid things like sheet marking and things like that. That allows you to chase a different customer base. And the other examples, when it comes to production increases, like on the left, on the bottom, you can hit relatively large dollar values, but the one on the bottom right I may be more familiar with. This is effectively a pickup roll where edges were dropping off, and by taking a look at the design of the suction box and or the design of the shell over the suction box, if you can eliminate busted edges and save a break or 2 a month, the money adds up really quickly. This is the first of our liner board. This is really a lightweight liner board / bag producer in the Southeast. This machine was built in 1980s and originally commissioned to run high-speed newsprint. They came to us after originally replacing the granite roll with a press jade release type cover, which is designed for high stickies in recycled LWC and or newsprint. They were moving to board and they came to us asking, hey, we understand that there's give and take between the 2 designs of a press jade W and a press jade release. Put simply, without overcomplicating it, the W stands for wear and or wood containing grades, and release stands for high DE content. So the release design is to combat stickies. The W is a little bit less focus on release and a little bit more focus on long-term wear. And this customer was concerned that when they went to a wood-containing grade that they were going to wear this roll out. We talked them into not making the change, leaving the press jade R in place to make sure that their concerns were warranted or not. And in the end, they're still able to run the roll to 3-year intervals with no conditionings in between. The second example is a board producer in the South, and these guys had an original build of 1964, put in with an open E&P shoe press in 1996. They have probably an LMP, would be the best way to describe their first press, followed by the shoe press. For that design, to be able to thread the press section, you have to have what's known as a rabbit trap. And what that allows you to do, moving to the next page, is the rabbit trap shown correctly maintained on the right, allows you to focus your vacuum on the area where the tail threads. If you don't get this interchanging mechanism to open and close that doorway there, you will have vacuum on the whole roll, which will maybe allow you to still tail the thread, maybe not as effectively because the lack of vacuum density there in that front edge. But the real issue is you have a tendency to try to pick the whole sheet up. And picking the whole sheet up at one time going through a shoe press was a bit of a problem for these guys. Huge risk of wrecking the shoe press. So being able to go back to original design and original intent of this roll saved quite a big press wreck. Here's another rebuild type situation. The machine was originally a 1977 Tampella, rebuilt by Beloit in 99 with 2 back-to-back closed. No, these are both open EMPs still. And this particular customer was struggling pretty bad with roll cover wear and blankets wear and even mechanical wear on the inside of the roll. And we were able to modernize this roll, installing capillary tubes, what is known as a hydrostatic type shoe, vastly improving the lubrication, reducing temperatures, basically not just saving the roll itself, but all the equipment and tune around it. This is more of a tissue case. In the tissue mills, the nips against the Yankee with pressure rolls and suction rolls is basically the most important thing going on. This particular customer, we had done some background work for them to simulate the differences between rubber and poly. We found that moving to a poly would improve their solids some, but we also, when we sold these covers, this is a case in South Korea, we sold these covers. We also sold them what's known as an iRoll portable. Both Valmet and some other suppliers supply permanent iRoll type or smart roll type devices inside the cover for monitoring pressure and giving the customer an indication of what their nip profile is like while the roll cover is in operation. The portable iRoll is something that only Valmet offers, and this allows us to install a similar sensor on the surface of the roll and allows us to run it up to speed and check all of the profiles. And if you have an accurate design of experiment, for lack of better ways to put it, if you know what you want to look at when you get started, you can solve nearly as many problems as you would be able to solve with a permanent install, and you can accomplish everything you want to accomplish in a 4 to 8 hour time frame, and you don't have to worry about the long-term maintenance hassles of trying to keep milliamp type electronics running in a very wet environment. It can be done, but it's not easy. In this particular case, the customer was showing pretty poor front to back skewing on their suction roll, and the second press roll showed pretty significant drop-offs on the edges. They were not able to maintain the pressure out on the edge. Whether it had something to do with the roll or the Yankee, I'm a little bit unsure of. I haven't studied the case that much. But by analyzing the iRoll data, they were able to create a new crowning profile for the roll, which improved not only their overall solids coming off the Yankee, but it improved their profile. Now I'm going to step back to the previous slide to sort of review the results there. They saw a 5% steam consumption reduction, and also saw with improved moisture profile and improved solids coming off the Yankee, saw an increase of 30 meters per minute, which had they taken that 5% steam consumption as well, it would have been an even bigger gains on the production side. To maybe spend a few minutes explaining our maintenance concept, we talk about scheduled maintenance or regular maintenance as services there on the left. I would say think of that as an oil change rather than a full rehaul on your vehicle. This is where the roll comes in and where parts are changed, where parts that might make it a second run are inspected, and we do not totally tear down bearing assemblies. That's the key to what a scheduled maintenance is. If you're running for example, if you run a tissue machine, it's an oil-based application, and you get 6 months on a rubber cover in the nip, you may pull it out after 6 months, grind it, put it back in the machine, pull it out after another 6 months, do a scheduled maintenance on it, put it back in the machine for 6 months, pull it out, grind it, and then on that next maintenance rotation, you would potentially go to what we call recondition services, where not only are you going through your regular wear components, but at this point, you're going to tear down, inspect the journals, NDT the journals, NDT the heads, and let's verify that all of the long-term components are still in good shape. Then finally on the right there, what's highlighted in the box is what in North America we call modernizations, but I think on the global level, they still call it upgrade type products. And you've heard me mention that a few times on the call here, and I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of what I'm talking about. Again, if you go back to potentially the average age of equipment in North America, at least roll equipment in North America being maybe 1985, there have been a lot of upgrades to both suction rolls and CC rolls in the past 35 years. So here's just some examples. Some of the older designs, Tampella or Carcano or someone like that, might not have the internal worm screw for adjusting the box, in which case customers at times, if they want to adjust a cooch roll or a pickup roll, they may actually have to put the sheet in the cooch to be able to move the box. That's painful and can be upgraded to a box that you can rotate on your own. I'm not going to go through each of these, but another one worth mentioning is the internal shelf flow H, oscillating internal shower, which today we also have a compact version of that for maybe North America specifically, because 70% of the installed base here is Beloit, and the fit between the box and the shell is a little tighter for Beloit rolls, so the compact version may be thought of as a Beloit design for internal cleaning showers. This basically is water driven. It oscillates back and forth It can be tuned in to come on during breaks and clean the shell from the inside out rather than from the outside in. Today, most suction rolls that have cleaning showers are outside in. The advantage of being internal is that all of the material knocked out of the shell is now being knocked out of the shell instead of getting caught up in your suction box and anything else you wouldn't want it to get involved with. If you had some vacuum leakages going different ways, you could even be preventing water from getting into your bearings. So that's another example. These you guys can study these, and if you've got something that strikes your fancy, you can contact us. A quick 2-slide opportunity to talk about crown control roll upgrades. One of which that I see to be most beneficial is your standard Valmet CC roll, designed in the 60s, probably on up into the 90s, often had a inline drive hub, and due to that, had to have a triple race bearing. And triple race bearings now are manufactured on limited manufacturing schedules, and they are, as a result, quite expensive. But by altering that design to a standard bearing with a gearbox and an offset drive, you may have to spend a little money on the modernization, but it puts you in a place where your spares and bill of materials and components for the roll are now much more standardized and saves a lot of money in the long term. Another example of upgrading an old Valmet design to a newer design is the Seal Modification, where on a CC roll gearbox to roll interface, they would use the gray on the left, which were rubber bellow seals. And as you guys know, as rubber ages, it starts to crack. If you don't believe me, go look at the sidewalls on your vehicle. If you've got an old set of tires, especially if you live in the South where there's a lot of sun, you'll eventually start to crack. Well, these bellows would do the same, and as a result, you'd have safety hazards and oil losses, all of which cost money. Today, the LR seal is a mechanical replacement of those rubber bellows, which the mechanical seal can't rot on the shelf because it's not rubber. In summary of the things we've talked about from roll services agreements, wanted to point out again that we talked about a very wide range of service agreement types. I will admit we are trying to standardize for our own sake, maybe discount levels, so that we don't get confused between our different customers. We kind of have a standard offering of what sort of discounts we would offer, but it doesn't mean that the range of service types would be limited in any way. Commercial and value-added benefits of a service agreement, we discussed that a bit. What the implementation schedule and how it would be implemented was discussed a little bit. What type of replacement roles and how that would dovetail into the service agreement was discussed. We reviewed 4 case studies and described the modular maintenance concept. Each service visit should not be the same. There's plenty of ways to save money by understanding your equipment and how it needs to be serviced. Really no different than a vehicle. And then modernizations and what those are and what that word means.
That was a great presentation, Dave and Mikko. Thank you very much. Now, before we get into the Q&A portion of this webinar, let me say that this presentation is available in PDF form. Simply email David at david.williams@valmet.com or Mikko at mikko.viljama@valmet.com, and they'll be happy to send you a copy. We've received a fair number of questions already, but you can still submit them during this Q&A period. If Mikko and David cannot answer them today, because they need more information or the question deals with confidential matters, they'll be sure to email you a comprehensive answer after the webinar. We've got both David and Mikko unmuted. Whichever of you wants to start first, do some Q&A. Take it away.
Yeah, I can start, David Ward. There's a question about continuous improvement, and I guess I wasn't very specific what that means. The person is asking what is it and how does it work. So continuous improvement is a program where we basically, when we come and visit your mill regularly, we have people, experts, specialists there. We know that we typically find some savings or improvements from your projects. So it's kind of a commitment from Valmet's side that when we have an agreement together, we promise that we can find some savings or improvements, like I said, from any part of your process, any part of the mill. Typically, this continuous improvement is related to the, for example, the volume of business. So let's say that you do X amount of volume with Valmet. Against that X, we promise you amount of savings or improvements back to you guys. So you know that we are committed, we are in this together, and Valmet is there to help and support you.
Are Valmet roll agreements only for Valmet rolls, or can the agreement be used, including analysis and upgrades for non-Valmet rolls? And the answer is the agreements can work for anyone. We have agreements with customers that have competitors' rolls as well. If there is anything that needs to be navigated to that end, might be working on spare parts packages for the roll with the other supplier if we are unable to back engineer it, but in most cases we are.
I have a question here. So if we do business with Valmet in different areas, like refiner plates and vacuum elements on the table, can unrelated things be bundled in an agreement, and is there an additional benefit rather than doing separate ones? The answer is yes, we definitely can bundle, and yes, it definitely makes sense to bundle. Again, more things we can tie together, more benefits we can find for both of us, and we can definitely provide more incentives and services when our people are already regularly visiting the mill. There's typically something one person can do more than just one agreement or look after one agreement. So absolutely yes, let's bundle, and yes, definitely benefits for the customer specifically.
Is there any cost associated with an initial site visit to perform an audit or assessment to determine how you could best support us? And I would say that the answer to that question is no. But those type of original visits to kind of weigh out how the relationship works best are often handled by the sales group and the product sales managers, and then the product managers and the business unit gets more involved after the agreement has been signed. The answer to your question is within the Valmet organization, there's enough people that we would be able to pull that off. And maybe we have some small issues going on right now around COVID with people being able to come across the border and whatnot, but we would be able to work through that and make that happen. So if you would discuss with your sales team, we could figure something out on how to do some sort of initial audit.
I have a question, or I got a question regarding incentives and services, and it's funny. People are usually interested about free stuff. So as an example of what we can provide as a part of agreement that we don't have to charge anything separately is, of course, like Dave also mentioned, access to our proprietary programs like asset managers and whatnot. We can do troubleshooting typically with the agreements. We can send people over to help you with certain issues. And then I don't remember if Dave mentioned, but we do have a lot of simulation and other programs. We can help to define what's the best cover type, what should be the dryness out of the press. We have the benchmark study globally we can use, so we can compare your machine to other machines and see where you are and where maybe you can be if we do something. So those are typical examples, I would say, from the free services and incentives we provide with the agreement.
Some of those were highlighted in that circular slide that will be distributed, showing the life cycle of the roll repair.
Any further questions? Okay, well, I hope we were able to respond to most, if not all, of your questions today. If not, Dave and Mikko will follow up via email with anyone whose question we were unable to answer. We'll also be emailing you a link to the recorded webinar as soon as it's available on YouTube at Valmet's YouTube channel. If you have any further questions, email them to david.williams@valmet.com or mikko.viljama@valmet.com, or reach out to them at LinkedIn and they can go more in depth with you about any needs you have for roll covers, maintenance, and agreements. We hope you've gained some valuable knowledge about roll covers, maintenance, modernizations, and Valmet agreements today that can help your mill moving forward. And thank you for giving us all your time today, and we hope you'll join us at future Valmet webinars. Bye-bye.